It is Share My Mood.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, Poh, welcome to Share My Mood.
Guys, you only had me around like weeks ago. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah,
We liked you so much.
As soon as the door closed, we were like, got to get her back. So, Poh, the idea of this podcast really is we kind of agree that we think that sharing how you're going is pretty much the most important thing that people can do for their mental health. And it's kind of how you identify what you're going through or how you are, and then how you express that, I think is really pivotal to everybody's happiness. And there's no right way to go about it either, which is really cool. And I think you're such a great guest for this podcast because so clearly you have found ways to express yourself in all sorts of different ways. And I want to start by asking about probably something that people wouldn't know you necessarily for, they might, but is your artwork.
Yeah.
Which is clearly important to you, and clearly a way that you, once you started painting and having a look at what your stuff now, I know that there's a motif or a theme within that, which is clearly you accessing something that you probably may or may not be able to talk about, but through the artwork you can express yourself.
Yes.
Can you talk to me about how art provides a role for you to...
Yeah. I think like art is almost my best friend because I'm never lonely with it. I always have a way to express and express my ideas, but also I like to sort of embed secrets within the artwork, and it's like I have a relationship with the work. So it's things that I would, and what's interesting is it does, even though it's unspoken and it feels like it's embedded, people will pick up on it if they're looking for that thing. Or there's a frequency that they're tapping into.
I see what you mean.
And so not everyone will have it, but like that's why I hesitate to talk about what my work, the meaning behind my work too much, because I feel like too much of that happens, especially with modern art.
Right.
And I
Where
think,
they tell you exactly what it's about and what you're looking for. And,
or tell you nothing in a way that's like quite sort of pompous.
Yeah.
You know,
Sure,
it's
you
like,
wouldn't get it.
Yeah, like it's designed to make you feel alienated and stupid kind of thing.
Yeah. Oh, you're not picking up on the theme here.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
you moron.
Yeah, that shoe with a bit of poo stuck to it on a plinth is about, world peace. I don't know.
I saw a banana sticky taped to a wall at a gallery recently, and I was like, "Come on!"
I know.
Anyway,
Did you feel alienated though?
I did. It was like,
Well, I had to say it, but it's done its job.
but sorry, go on.
Yeah. Oh no, it's fine. So I like it. I like to just because like my work's not. It's figurative, right? So it's like you can see it's a girl, doing whatever.
And it's always this same girl, right?
Yeah, it's always the same girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess I always hesitate to
It's
say
not
she's...
Pippi Longstockings, by the way, everyone. Like it is.
Sometimes she has plaits. But I always hesitate to say she's me, but it's more like I use her as a device to tell my stories.
Cool.
Because I think it's too close to say that she is me. It feels a bit, I don't know. It makes me feel a bit weird. So I've lost my train of thought already.
Good. Nice. I mean, I feel alienated.
So
if that's what you're after.
right. So that's right. So I don't want to be too prescriptive about what.
Yeah. That's what we were.
How people receive it. So it's just up to them. Like there's, if nothing, they can just, because people always go, oh, I don't know anything about art. They get very self-conscious.
Yeah.
They're like, oh, I just kind of like it for the colors. I'm like, great, just like it for that then. You don't have to feel crap about it. Like just like the colors or the way it makes you feel, And it's like food. Like everyone thinks there's a whole thing to anything that's in the arts. I think people get a little bit anxious about if they don't feel like they're educated in that field or whatever. And it's really just a process of like consuming it, and whatever tastes good to you is good. I mean, I do that now for a living as a judge, but like outside of that situation, because we have to have a set of obviously a system to judge the competition by, but outside of that I've become more and more lax as to like I'm like if it tastes good to you, it's good. If that looks good to you, it's good. Like whatever floats your boat, go for it,
But it's funny that like that, I think this is what's beautiful about art and maybe about food as well, is that it can come from a very specific place, and you might not know necessarily what that thing is when you're going through it. If you sit down to, well, anyone, like, you know, I know a lot of people cook when they're feeling anxious or feeling stressed. People do the same with painting. I know Woods, your partner Mim, obviously paints a lot as well. And it's
Really?
I find watching Mim paint fascinating as well, because clearly it's like she clearly uses the emotional part of her brain, which I've looked into a little bit more, the limbic system of the brain, which is totally different to the prefrontal cortex, which is like the rational part of your brain.
Yeah.
So she is weirdly able to like hold a rational conversation with me while emotionally pouring out onto a bit of canvas.
Yeah.
I don't know, because I've always said to her, I'm like, how are you're not concentrating right now on what you're doing? And she's like, it's not thinking.
No.
What I'm doing, it's just pouring out of me.
Do you know, I just had a conversation with Chrissy Swan about this, right? And it's to do with, I think, the type of, it's a brain type. And a lot of creative types, I think, have this thing, she told me it's called mirroring. So it actually helps you to express when someone's in the room not doing anything or just chatting to you or whatever.
Yes.
So it might be that.
How does that work?
But also, I think I've taken this off on a completely huge tangent.
No, this
reverse.
I mean,
go.
we are still talking about the same thing here, which is expressing yourself through art or using your hands, really.
Yeah. And for the same reason, I can be watching the most, people think I'm like listening to Bach and like, you know, I'm like watching the trashiest TV and like pumping out like what I think is beautiful, you know, and expressing myself. So it's like, it's just whatever makes you feel comfortable. I think everyone works so differently. It's all everyone's comfort level, that, you know, whatever makes them feel comfortable to allow that to flow out of them is so different.
And back to what I was saying at the start, so the point of this question is like, you have a release afterwards though, right? Like when you've finished painting or you spend a few hours or something.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you always like name what that thing is, or it just like, is it a...
It is, I know this sounds really psycho, but it's like feeling like a little god, because it's what I love about cooking as well.
Yeah.
And it's to do with bringing to life something that didn't exist. Right? It's a blank canvas and now there is like a full human looking thing in front of me, or it was just a bunch of raw ingredients and now there's like a plate of food that someone is really enjoying and it's delicious. So I love that feeling of creating something out of nothing.
Cool.
And I find it it really gives me a natural high.
Yeah. Cool.
And it fills me with this very kind of a spiritual gratitude.
Yeah.
Like
for sure.
it really, really affects me. Like,
wow.
Yeah.
Do you then look at either a food creation or a painting you've done and then identify, though, what emotion you're going through or what emotion you're expressing?
No. With food, I often am thinking of someone that might enjoy that dish. And I really love imagining how they'll enjoy it. And with art, it's more that it is kind of mindless in a way, because it's different, because it sounds like your partner paints in quite is she quite splashy?
Yes.
Yeah, see, with me,
very colours, splashes, not figurative in a way. Like sometimes she'll do like a weird, quirky, cartoony thing off on the side, but she's not really, quite different to the art that you do. Yes.
Yeah, and she's kind of just figuring it out as she goes along. Yeah,
totally.
Yeah. So that's very different to how I paint. I was trained as a designer, so the way I paint is very. I have a very clear preconceived idea of what I'm putting on the canvas. Like I plan it.
Okay.
I sketch it out and I translate that onto the canvas to scale precisely with a graph. And then
with a graph, not even a graph.
With a
my God.
graph. Yes. Don't paint. Come on, don't.
You were just disparaging the art snobs before, and now look at you.
It sounds Australian.
Do you say graph in South Australia?
Yeah, Steffi Graf.
And dance.
Really?
Yeah, they do.
Excuse me, dancer.
No, it's nice. We are talking about art here, so I think it's worth.
And so it's quite different, but I I find that quite no. I can see how that would work too. Yeah, it is working in using different parts of your brain.
That almost feels like funnily enough, how you're saying Mim paints is almost, it sounds like almost how you're making food, Poh, in terms of like this
yeah, maybe
pouring out release thing as opposed to strategically curating something.
Yeah, but still, it's just that process of seeing something that doesn't exist, that didn't exist prior, emerge. I find that a very and
you said that generates, which I find interesting, fascinating, really, in terms of this topic, because I think this is so important for how people feel, is a sense of gratitude after you've finished making something.
I think that is such a key. Is it an emotion or a state of mind?
Yeah, I think it's
state of mind.
I actually think it's more of a muscle, if I'm being honest, like a figurative muscle, if you like, gratitude, because I don't think it doesn't come naturally. Well, to some people you meet and they walk outside and they're like, oh my God, the day, the people, these clothes. And, they're lovely to be around for like 5 minutes. And then you're like, oh my God, sometimes if you're on their wavelength, you can feel that. But if you're not on their wavelength, like Woody, so he walks in here and he's like, oh my, every day. What a morning. And I'm like,
I need to pull it back sometimes. Sometimes I just need to read the room.
You are? Yeah, I know. I can feel that. Whereas someone like me, like I have to actively practice gratitude. I have to, when I meditate in the morning, I have to think of someone who I want to be more peaceful around. And then I've got to be like, okay, let's do this so that you're grateful for them. Let's do this so that you can be more peaceful around them. So it's not something that you can access easily. So I think it's funny. I don't think I've ever thought about cooking or artwork as a way to practice gratitude, but I think it's almost inevitable that when you're doing something with your hands that's not kind of, and I think this is going to be an important point to talk about as well, that's not kind of outcome focused. You're just making the food, you're enjoying making the food. Same with the artwork, probably, that's obviously, it's a cliche to say that ego is the death of art. As soon as you start thinking about how it's going to be perceived or how good it is, then you lose, like the gratitude just gets cut at the knees because you're kind of cutting off that channel. But do you think that like your mood, your mental health and being in touch with how you're feeling is drastically improved through this sense of gratitude? And do you think you have such a strong sense of gratitude because of what you do?
Yeah, I think I was just going to say that I feel like if you can train your that muscle, I think it is key to good mental health is gratitude, because gratitude brings it all to you knowing that you are a dot in the firmament, and every time you think I think it's this balance of thinking you can make change, but also realizing that you are never the person who's suffering the most ever. And living in Australia, like you can't complain. I shouldn't say that because there are some people in terrible situations that we wouldn't even be able to imagine. So there's always an exception. But for the most part, we live in an affluent country with like good social services and like there's just kind of almost always a solution,
Yeah.
But yeah, I think when we try to think about how lucky we are, like it just always grounds you, I think.
It's a great dissolving agent, isn't it? I think I heard in a podcast recently that if you're listening to a podcast on a smartphone right now, there's a billion people who would actively trade places with you right now.
Yeah,
it's so true.
So if you are listening to this, there are a billion people who would like to trade places with you. A billion. Like that's the entire population of India.
So true.
Yeah, exactly.
So
it's actually one of my favorite topics to talk about when in social situations, because I feel like there's such a epidemic of victimhood happening at the moment, and it really worries me. Because it's rife with the younger gen, but I'm even feeling it with people sort of just a bit younger than me, because there's just so much around because of social media now. That makes everything spread like wildfire. And I was listening to this thing, I can't remember where, this guy was talking about how there is so much like medical, like sort of psych terminology woven into our everyday vernacular now that people are just are using them to like form tribes and to sort of like
Or
lean
the
into
self-diagnosing.
and lean into
Yeah.
things that are giving names to things that are actually and pathologizing things that are normal things that you go through life
Yeah.
that fill you with anxiety. Going to school. Oh my God. I freaking hated school.
Yeah.
And I was so anxious
Yeah.
from
Of course,
from tiny till like high school, all the way through high school.
Yeah.
Because I was always like a little bit on the outer, right?
Yeah.
And when we give people a place, when we allow, we want people to rise above it
Yeah.
and to acknowledge it and to work through it. But like I think like when you give someone like a term or some kind of pathology to name it, it allows them just to sit in it and go, yeah, I've got that.
That's what I've got.
Yeah, so I
And
don't
if
have
I'm
to do
not
anything
getting
about it. And
medicated
there's heaps
for
of
it,
people with it.
And
you know.
if I haven't got somebody looking after it for me, then it's I'm just gonna die in the ass.
That's a story they tell themselves, and then it's
Yeah.
like it almost like becomes this self-sourcing pudding. Almost,
Yeah,
where it's like,
exactly.
oh, I've got that, and now I'm just going to lean right into that rather than thinking,
How can
okay,
I
well,
fix this? Yeah, I
Yeah.
need to fix this. It's not going to fix itself. And
It becomes a
there's
sense of
And so-
identity almost, doesn't
So
it?
you're saying
yes, it becomes an identity.
That like I am that,
That
or
thing.
I have that,
Yes.
and almost like the idea of separating yourself from that is a bit scary because it's like, what am I or who am I
Yes.
if I don't have this?
Yeah.
This yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So
and you're
like,
saying you need to fix it, right?
yeah.
But that's not necessarily a good thing either. Is this idea of like I've got to try and spend my time fixing it?
not fixing it, but like finding things to displace that anxiety. So find things that you love to do.
Or soothe it. Listen to
Yeah.
it. Listen to it.
Yeah.
Soothes
Yeah.
a good word. Yes.
Yeah,
You're right.
yeah.
Soothes a great
Yeah.
word.
And I think the best thing to do to soothe it with is to do something that you love. Do something that makes you feel useful and makes you feel validated, not by anyone else, but makes yourself feel validated
Can
by
I talk
you.
about this idea of you and doing things that make you feel happy? And then can I ask you about relationships? Are you comfortable talking about
Yeah.
past
Yeah,
relationships?
yeah.
So you've had two divorces.
Yes.
And I've heard you talk about the fact that within these relationships you were, and please tell me if I'm using words wrong, but losing this sense of individuality.
Yeah, losing myself. Was the first one who he's still my ride or die, Matt.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
We still have like the hugest domestics in front of his partner, who's my best friend. That's the part of the whole
Awesome.
weird story.
Sorry. So your first ex-husband
Yes,
is now with your best friend.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. And then you're all still good
Yeah,
mates.
we're all still really good mates.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That is so amazing.
So he
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I think that's personally, I think that's a mark of a really mature person is when I meet them and then they're like, oh, you find out that a person you've been hanging out with is their ex, but it's like, we're just so much bigger than what was.
Yeah, because I think I believe that if you haven't been able to metabolize like whatever was causing you the grief, it's still always there.
Yeah, it's
and it's like, I think it's unresolved love. So you have to actually work through it and transform it into something else for it to be healthy so you can both move on. Because I think when people are still triggered by their partners, I think there's something about them that still has a hold over them.
100%.
And you want to be rid of that, so that you're an empty vessel to be like, go on to your new relationship with.
I feel like I got some really good advice around that once, which was that like the fastest way to kind of get over someone is to realize that you'll always love them,
Oh, that's beautiful.
rather than thinking that like, oh, I'm gonna get over it, because in English we obviously say, "I'm gonna get over them, get over them," and
Yeah.
it's like, well, no, you kind of got to go through
Yes.
them rather than over them. You can't.
Yeah, yeah.
You're
That's-
always going to love them. It
Yeah.
might just feel differently.
Yeah, yeah. That's
Yeah.
exactly how I felt. And, I mean, having said that, like I always take into consideration that we didn't have kids, so that always helps things get less neurotic.
Yeah.
when you
Sure.
break up,
Yeah, yeah.
Because
Yep.
that's a really difficult situation to
Of
manage.
course.
And I don't know what that feels like, but I imagine it would be wrought with a lot of heightened emotions because new partners come in and then, you know, them
Of course,
calling them
yeah, of
mum
course,
and
yeah, yeah.
you
The
know,
way the
that's-
child's been raised.
Yeah,
and, I want them raised this
exactly.
way and that way.
Exactly.
I mean, even with we've both got small daughters now, and it's
Yeah.
amazing how there's all these new disagreements you can have with your partner. All of a sudden, because it's not necessarily about a you and me thing. It's about you're treating our daughter like this.
Yeah,
I was kind of thinking it should be that way.
yeah.
It's you know, even within a couple that's still together, that
Yes.
brings a whole bunch of other tricky things to
Yeah,
navigate.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But you were talking, so the quote that I saw, was about this idea of you having individuality.
Yes.
And-
So I
and-
think that, like, for the first relationship, that's when I identified that it was getting really unhealthy because I was getting so lost in the dysfunction that I didn't recognize myself anymore. And I was just reacting all the time. I was just so easily... we could just push each other's buttons and just you could have an argument about this, that. Like it was just insane. And that's when I'm like, I'm getting lost in this like bitterness and I need to find myself again. And so when we finally broke up, I was like, wait a minute, this is so cool because we now get to like keep all the things that we still love about each other because we loved each other's company. Like we were great friends, but as a marriage, it just didn't work. So we got to just throw all the bad things in the bin and keep all the good things.
Yeah, great.
And then when he ended up being with Sarah, everyone was like, oh my God, like how are you dealing with that?
Yeah.
And I was like, it's fine. Like I'm a human. So like it did, you know,
Of course.
felt a bit odd at the beginning, but at the same time, I loved that he was with someone that I loved.
Yeah.
You know, like better than someone that I didn't like.
Yeah.
And I was like, if I choose to be offended by this, it's not even rational. It's me hanging on to old garbage
Yeah.
that I actually wanted in the bin. And I'm like getting all the garbage and putting it back into my house. Why would I do that? That's like insane.
Yeah.
So that's how I sort of worked through that.
It's what you said there is actually something really lovely that I think's tied in with to be so self-aware of your relationship like that. I think is unique because I think I was listening to this podcast come up twice now on this show, but it's a good podcast on Diary of a CEO. I was listening to Esther Perel talk, and
I love her.
she's so good, so good, and she was saying that. She obviously, if you don't know who she is, she's a psychotherapist. She works in relationships. She was saying she always finds it really funny when people walk in. She sees a couple and they walk in and like one of the first things they'll say is that they're adamant that they're individuals. And she's like, well, you're not because you've chosen to be with someone. And as soon as you choose to be with someone, who you are is defined entirely by the pattern that you've agreed to be in with that person.
Yeah.
And she was like, if you think of it like a figure eight loop, you both feed the loop. And then people break up when the loop's broken. So like when one of you goes, okay, I don't like the way that this keeps coming back to me. And it's exactly what you said. You were like, just everything just kept coming back in the same way.
Yeah.
So to realize that, I think is enormous. And I think that kind of ties in with, I'm struck by how mindful you are because you keep, Kate Langbrook sort of touched on this a bit when we spoke to her last about the guys who were the band playing on the Titanic when the Titanic was going down. And I think like in your life, although this becomes really tricky when you're going through a really tough moment, you do have a choice. Like she was saying, the guys in the Titanic, like this is an awful moment. We can despair here and we can, jump on the door or try and jump on the door, whatever space is left. Or we can play the music. And it's funny when you were talking about your breakup there, she was talking about her son being really sick, that you have a choice. It's like, I can either despair in this and this is awful and, my ex is with my best friend, or you can choose. But I don't think that you get that choice unless you're spending time being aware of what you're thinking and what you're feeling. Do you consciously do that?
I do, and I think it's because I've always had careers where I had that space to do it. Yeah, so I've always naturally, I think by design, but I don't know what fed into what, but I've never ever wanted to have an office job because I've always known that I need that room around work to process life.
Yeah.
And if it starts to get really hectic, I find I need a lot of time to think. Because I am quite a solitary person, and but that's what gives me just that reprieve, and I can just figure stuff out.
You have space from it. Yeah.
So what do you, when you say you have time alone to process and feel and understand what's going on, what are you actually doing?
Painting, cooking, gardening.
Yeah.
I love
It's
that.
all the things that I do for work. Yeah, I know.
And that's and by doing those things,
Yeah.
you're then ruminating or just allowing them out, or
Yeah. And I'm always very curious. Like I'm good at removing myself from the situation. And I like to go, oh, that was weird how I flew off the handle about that. Like, what's that about? You know, like
It's such safety and interest, isn't there?
Yeah, I'm so curious.
Yeah.
I love I love figuring stuff out because I have absolute faith that everything is connected.
Yeah.
And I know, and if I think hard enough, there's a solution, and I can trace as to the origin of the issue.
Yeah.
And so, I just use those times, and it's just that thing of just being
Using your
occupied
hands
with
for something else.
Totally.
Yeah.
and your mind has to not be thinking hard. It has to just be relaxed,
exactly.
so that
Exactly.
those thoughts can emerge,
Come and go.
in a very sort of organic way.
Yeah.
And that's when they are the most truthful, I
Yeah.
find.
I think that's a really good point for people listening.
So absolutely. Like busy yourself almost, and don't force it.
Yeah, don't force it.
But then will you write it down? Like after you have a bit of an aha moment,
Yeah.
say if you did fly off the handles with someone and you've gardened, the garden looks amazing, and you've had the moment where you're like, I understand why I did that.
Yeah.
Do you then go and write that down, or do you
Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. And now, oh my God, I'm so all over the place. Right, I've got like 1,000 notebooks with one note in it. So I'll never be able to collate them because I don't even know where they are. And my note section will be like, buy dark chocolate to bake cake, and then it'll be like, oh, wisdom, it can't be earned. No, it can't be taught. It has to be earned. Like, you know, all these random things through lists. So they're just like
categories in
it's
your
just
notes.
everywhere.
You know what's so funny is I think I often used to see those people who had like minds like that, like, you know, friends of mine that they're artists or musicians often or they've got great gardens for that matter, and you go into their house and you look at like their filing system and you're like, you are fucking nowhere. Like how are you doing your tax return? How are you know, like those people. But I know you are. I think I've realized that.
Like, it's a miracle when people go, oh, you've had quite a bit of, success. And I was like, I don't know how I got here.
But they're the people that have got it figured out because they realize that there's this like inevitable disaster / like wild goose chase that goes on in like actively hunting your thoughts for some sort of sense of purpose or reason or answer. Because you never get there.
But don't you think that is with life in general? I feel like when you force anything,
100%,
something always goes a bit wrong or a lot wrong.
Yeah.
Totally.
Whether it be love or whatever. Because this friend said to me recently, and I think it's so clever. She said, like, with life, you want to be like a magnet. You don't want to be chasing.
Yeah, nice. Yeah,
because when
exactly.
you're chasing, you're allowing your emotions to take control.
Yep.
Whereas when things come to you, you can consider your position, whether you want it. Is this good for me? Like, but when you're chasing, you're in this state of mind that I feel is cancelling out ration.
You put the blinkers on a little bit.
Yeah,
And if ever I've been like chasing something so badly, it's like an opportunity will arise.
Yes.
I won't even see it.
Yeah, tunnel
Because
vision.
that's not part of the plan.
And I think that I want to bring you back to what you said about being curious, which is, for me, sort of this quality in your mind of being interested. is such a safe place because it kind of naturally disassociates you from what you're feeling.
Yes.
Because if you're happy about what's going on, you're holding on to it, or you're like angry about what's going on, you're pushing away, you're creating a reaction and then you're creating another emotion. But if you're interested, you naturally, you disassociate from what you're feeling. Like it creates this like what we used to call in the school ground barley, where you're like, oh, you know what? I'm actually not going to react to that. I'm just going to go, I'm like, wow, that's going on. That's so interesting. I can't believe that's happening right now. And you're doing it from a place that's not in the same space as that thing. It's from a different spot.
Yes.
So now I really want to ask you, because I think that's a really beautiful way to approach what's going on inside you and to identify how you're feeling. But that can be really, really tricky when you're going through something that's drawing you in like a black hole.
Yeah.
And I want to talk to you, if you're happy talking about it, about your miscarriage.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Because this, for me, I think for a lot of people listening to this show, you know, these are all lovely ideas that we all have about how to get through our lives, and that's interesting. And when you're gardening and you're cooking and stuff, but then when you've got something that's like truly, like pure grief, that's a really hard thing to be interested in.
Yeah.
So can you talk through just like what happened and how you went through it?
Yeah. So it's a really interesting one. And it's wrought with many layers of complexity. So my ex really wanted a child, but I was, the whole time, he was like, I definitely want to, you know, that's always been part of my plan. And I thought I always did, but I was in a position where my earning capacity was higher than his, and we'd built a lifestyle around my income.
Okay.
And I was starting to get older, and that was starting to make me feel a bit frigid about the idea. It just started, it was like we had heaps of time, and then suddenly you're like 40, you know? And I was like, oh man, I actually don't know how this would work now, because I don't know how this would work. Like, would I have to, and because I'm like, I'm freelance essentially.
Do you mean like financially work or practically as well?
Yeah, and also practically. And just talking about being an individual, right? I started to think about how so much of what I do is about me being free. And I started to think, I think if I had started earlier, I would have had more courage, and I would have bounced back quicker with considering it. But as I got older, I got more fixed in my ways, and I got more frightened about how it would encroach on my independence. And as I'm getting older as a creative, there's so many ideas I want to express, right, with my art and all these other projects that I have. And I was starting to think, do I have a child or do I keep creating? And is my creating the child? Like, I have to pick, right? And you have to as a woman.
Yeah.
That's something that is unique to a woman, right?
Yep.
And for time and eternity will be the unique issue.
That's the setup.
Yeah. And so anyway, I got pregnant by accident. And it was interesting because even though I was really worried about it, when it happened, I don't know, whatever the hormones that kick in, I was like elated, loved the idea, it was great. And then on the 12th week, it was literally on the day that I could tell people I lost the baby. And
that's sucks.
I know. And I don't know what you guys think having children. I actually think that it's a really weird thing that we're encouraged to not tell people, when I think it's the opposite, but it might be my brain type. I think if you tell everyone, then when it does happen, or if it happens, which is like a third, is it? A third of pregnancies?
Yeah, I think it's as high as that now,
But people would have no idea it's that high.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
And so how I processed it was with those figures. I was like, I'm not special. I always go back to you are a dot, you are not special.
Yeah, you mentioned that earlier.
And I always go back to, not instead of why me, why not me? And that gets me out of everything.
Well, it's gratitude again, isn't it?
Yeah. And I'm still so grateful that I got to go through that experience because I actually went through the full labor at
Yeah,
home.
I read that. So you
And
wow.
yeah,
At home?
yeah, it's pretty full on.
Wow, with your partner there?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh.
It was 10 hours.
Oh my god. Oh my god.
I didn't really
Oh.
know it was happening.
That is so full on.
Yeah, and then I actually saw the
So
baby.
you birthed.
I birthed.
Wow.
The baby, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Oh wow.
yeah.
Was it just the two of you?
It was just the two of us.
Oh man.
Yeah, me and Jono, yeah.
I can't imagine anything more traumatic than
Yeah.
that.
And
Oh.
it's so intense that it's quite surreal in my head. Like it's a bit dream state because I was in a lot of pain and I was losing so much blood, and but it's interesting. Like I had a really good cry for about a day,
Yeah.
and then all that other stuff just kicked in. I was just like, it's like a third of all the women, like a third of us go through this, and I was never able to get pregnant again, which I'm actually also fine about because I was sort of so not sure about it anyway. And then John and I ultimately ended up breaking up, so I was really grateful because I thought, that's just, you know, and now he's actually got a baby with a new partner now, which I'm so happy for them because that's what he's wanted the whole time. But yeah, I just kind of, I'm still really grateful. I still have the picture of the ultrasound on my fridge, which creeps people out. I laugh at everything, guys. Everything is worth laughing
You
at.
have to, yeah.
You have to.
Yeah.
Honestly, it feels so dark, but you have to. And because it reminds me of this thing that I was able to experience as a woman.
Yeah.
I went through pregnancy.
Yeah.
I actually went through the process of birthing. I know what that feels like, and I know what it feels like to have something growing inside me, which is just such a special thing, you know. So, yeah, that's how I went through it.
It's interesting. So I want to the thing that you mentioned, so we had a miscarriage as well, and before we had our daughter, and we had the same. I mean, it's obviously not for everyone, but we had the same approach, which was like, I'd rather tell people what's going on here beforehand, so that if it did happen, you know, that was cool. But then, interestingly, when we lost the baby, I think it was about 8 weeks. Maybe even less actually. It was very small, and it was just like the first scan we did. It was like no, but I find it funny that, you know, again, talking about sharing your mood or telling people how you're going, expressing how you're going, that the hard part wasn't, and I think this is just in general about telling your loved ones how you're feeling. And it's kind of this. The hard part was watching the expression, was watching other people.
I think, you know,
like how upset they were for you.
I take back. I love it when people change my mind. I completely.
Oh, so
I'm
tough,
going back to
right?
that. No, I don't think people should tell people because you're
that's
right.
why you don't do it.
It's
You
actually
don't.
managing other people grieving for you, and you're dealing with your own grief, and then you have to babysit their grief.
I know.
No, you're right.
I know. And you look at them and you're like, oh my God, I don't want to have to tell you this. And they're like, oh, I'm so sorry. And they start crying, and you're like, I can't do this right. Exactly. I've got my own thing going on right now.
Yeah. And also, people are so orkies with grief.
Oh, it's so strange.
Yeah, they don't, like, it has such a spectrum of reactions.
Yeah.
Like, people can be sometimes so over the top.
Yeah. They're compensating.
That it makes you want to punch them.
Yeah. I almost feel like you need to say, like, if we get pregnant again, I almost feel like you need to, or maybe let's just say this for all grief in general when you tell your friends, you almost need to say to them beforehand, hey, look, I'm going to tell you this thing, but like, I just need you to be like rock solid for me for a little bit. Like, I know that you're probably feeling as well, but like, just prefacing the fact that this birth doesn't go well. If I turn to you in 6 or 8 or 10 or 12 weeks and say it hasn't worked out, I just need you to kind of like buy me a beer and like
Yeah.
just stay strong.
Yeah.
Just for me.
And also,
and cry in your own time.
and also, like, you're actually allowed to laugh as well.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
I'll
don't
crack a
suddenly
joke.
go
Yeah, crack a
dark
joke about
and
it. Yeah,
be completely
yeah.
a different human.
Yeah, yeah.
It's still us. It's still
Yeah.
us. Something really awful's happened, but we
Yeah.
can still.
That's good advice,
Can
actually.
I ask you then? I find this so interesting listening about that. How then it can be annoying's probably the wrong word, but when people get emotional around what you're going through, when you cried for a day, and that was your moment to grieve, were you alone?
Yes.
And
I liked it that way. Because I want to know that I'm doing it myself. I don't like, I think if, this is just me personally,
Yep.
I think if I'm leaning on too many people, I'm suspicious then that it's them that's helping me. I need to know that I've properly dealt with it on my own so that if they're not around, I have really dealt with it.
it's the hardest thing that me and my partner.
But everyone's so different.
Absolutely. I'm a alone crier, alone sufferer, and for a long time I've thought that was the wrong way to do it, and I've been a bit self-conscious that I'm doing it badly if I should be allowing people to be the shoulder, but it doesn't work for me.
No, it makes me like, you know that theory of like babies that have been abandoned, and if they've done these tests where like to show, like if you put I think it's to do with controlled crying actually.
Yeah, right.
And so if you leave them in a room and you don't come to their aid, but if you control it and you come in and you still give them a little comforting cuddle, but then they know you're still there, they still know it's safe even though they're distressed, right? But if you abandon them when they're crying uncontrollable, when you eventually go to give them a cuddle, they'll do this banana bend reaction where they want to like they'd rather fling themselves out of your arms.
Wow.
It's like mistrust.
Wow.
So like,
oh my
yeah,
God.
that's
I've
So we've got
definitely-
that?
No,
Is that what
I
yours-
just feel like when someone's like overly, you're like, no.
Yeah, I've definitely
totally.
experienced that.
It's that it just makes me think of that picture of just going, no, I can't. It's like it's too overwhelming. I need to just
my
do this
God.
on my own.
I need to be alone.
Yeah,
I need to,
yeah.
My
it's very
daughter
hard for my
definitely did
partner
that early on.
'cause
She used to arch her back. And I'll be like, oh my God, I can't hold on to
She
you.
hates
too
you.
much. That's the take home.
Pretty much.
Just kidding.
Yeah. No,
But
sometimes
yeah,
she does.
I found that because my partner will then she'll try to like because she'll know something's up, and then what we've said when we're both in a good place is like, you did the best thing you can do is leave me alone. But then she tries because she's like, I'm worried about you.
It's instinctive.
And
she
I'm
wants to
like-
help
It's
out.
to do with love languages as well, isn't it? Yeah, and also
Totally.
how families.
Yeah, how
Jono,
you're raised in a family.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
because that's my role in the family as well as the caretaker.
Yeah.
As soon as
yeah,
you see
well,
someone
yeah.
suffering around you, you're like, right, get me in there. What do
Totally.
you need?
Yeah.
And you need people that are close to you to be like, hey, fuck off.
Because I need aloneness, and my ex Jono, my second husband, he came from a really big family, and so I think the mum was just like, okay, I need to create this like very democratic situation. Whoever's done the wrong thing, it doesn't matter. You just hug and make up. And for me, I'm like, no. We need to just back up and talk specifically about this issue, nut it out very, very. And he was like, no, like we need to just make up and it's all good, right? But I'm like, what? No. So just everyone has such different ways of sating whatever that thing is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I've got some audio of you actually, which I wouldn't mind playing. This is probably the last thing we'll have time to talk to you about, but I think it really ties in with this confronting what you're going through.
That felt like 5 minutes.
I know, it could keep going, but this is you talking about exactly that, about being able to talk and confront with yourself what you're going through, which is really what this podcast is all about.
I like bringing this up because I think it's something that people should talk about. And I think it's this sort of silent grief that women have to go through all the time. I really like to confront my emotions up front. Like, I think it's really healthy. I don't like to bury anything.
Yeah, I do. I'm very head on. I'm like, let's go.
Do you think that's ever damaging at all?
No,
Yeah.
I think it's really good.
Because I just think that, sorry, I just to that point, the reason I'm asking that is I think it's ironic because I think that literally our MO as we go through our lives is, if you're going through something, to run the other way from it for as long as you can until you get to a point where you end up in therapy, or you've got a friend, or you have a breakdown where you go, oh, hang on a second, I'd better realize that I'm going through something. And I also think that people get magically good at lying to themselves about the fact that they're going through something.
Yes.
Until they end up in therapy, or they have a breakdown, or they
It's
know someone
emotional.
close to them goes, hey, that you're not good at the moment.
Have you ever, watched an episode of those like hoarders shows?
Yeah.
It's like doing that, but with emotions.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So with me,
Yeah,
I'm
so
just,
how quickly do
I'm
you
like, as soon as I
identify?
get something, chuck it out. Like I just process it. So even now, and we're still going through stuff with Jono in my head, even though we've been divorced for like 5-6 years now.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, right, I'll be alone at home and I'll do something goes wrong, and I was like, oh my God, if Jono was here, I would totally have blamed him.
Yeah. Wow.
Oh, wow.
Right? And you need that separation when you're trying to make things work. It's so hard to see the forest from the trees, and you both just dig your heels in. So no one's like giving or letting and absorbing and processing. Everyone's just reacting. So sometimes we just get this bizarre phone call. He's so lovely because he always like puts me on speakerphone so his new partner knows it's nothing weird.
Oh.
And I go, hey, Jono, sorry, it's a bit random, you right? What are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm just, chopping some wood, whatever.
Chopping
And I go,
some wood.
I'm just making that up. And I go, so I just did this thing today. I took the mail out, blah, 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 and lost this thing. And I just know that if you were here, I would have blamed it on you. Wow. And I just want to say
You told him.
that for all the times that I used to do that to you and you used to complain about, I know what that is now. I get it because I'm alone and I know what I did. But when you were around and you complained about it, I didn't want to know about it.
Oh, wow.
So it's so good. And this is one of the great things about
Wow.
having
Amazing
a
awareness.
having a good relationship with your ex is so good because you get to keep venting all your stuff.
Yeah.
And then he would then go, oh, Poh, like I did, but I was also this,
Yeah.
and it's so healing.
So great.
And it's just this constant thing.
Yeah.
And I probably do like 3 phone calls a year kind of thing.
With him,
Yeah.
where you just confront something that you felt
Yeah.
during the relationship, and you're still processing that now.
Yeah,
with
because
him.
things will just pop up like a
Wow.
specific thing that he used to say to
Wow.
me, like, you're very harsh about this kind of thing. I'm like, no, you're
No,
just
yeah,
blah, blah,
yeah,
blah,
yeah.
whatever. And then I'll just catch myself doing it
Oh.
because when you're alone, you soften because you've got nothing to.
protect yourself from.
And like that's when I go, oh my God, that is so bad. I used to do that all the time. No wonder he's like, he told me he was feeling damaged, and I was just like ignoring it.
It's quite astounding how good we are in relationships or in our own lives as individuals of like concealing the thing that's actually going on.
Yeah.
It's astounding. Like I'm always, even someone as in touch with themselves as you are, and we've just spoken about how your art can help you and making food can help you and gardening can help you. You're constantly thinking about it and interested in it. That even for someone like you're still surprised by a lie that you've told yourself about an emotion that you've had.
Yes. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
You're so, you can't trust yourself,
No.
can you? Yeah.
I need to build the evidence sometimes. Sometimes I go to mental court where I'm like, okay, you've got this thought about something that's going on, whether it's an assumption. Then I'm like, how would you present that in court? And then I'm like, well, I just know. And it's like, would that hold up in court? What's your evidence?
Yeah.
And then
Really?
I've got to go into the evidence and I'm like, I've got
Yeah.
nothing.
2 + 2 = 7 because I feel it is.
Exactly.
Oh, that's why
Exactly.
Sam and I try and see a relationship counselor every month, even if things are really good. And then like that's because like and often I will build my case. Like I just go. I used to do law, so I go straight into legal mode, where I'll have a proper case. And and like in the back of my mind, I'll be like, she's fucked here. Like I'm in a
This is watertight.
This is game over.
Yeah.
This is what couples therapy is all about. Winning.
I know. I know. And then I'll get
Start.
2 minutes in, and the
Start,
couple
Will.
therapist will be like, You're a dickhead.
And that's about as waterproof as a sieve.
But they don't even need to go into it. They're just like, the whole tone that you've got going on here. Like this isn't a combat, but you naturally try and fortify your walls in a relationship, as you said, to protect yourself.
Yeah. I think the key is actually curiosity. If you can reframe anger into curiosity, like be curious about why that makes that person feel so angry, I reckon you've got the keys to a lot of problem solving if you just reframe it. And I think Esther Perel has taught me so much about that. Like she's like, just reframe it and take yourself out of that picture. And it's so useful because most problems stem from ego. So when you look outside of that is when you find a lot of the solutions. Like, sorry, just quickly.
No, of course.
I heard her talk about this thing recently about how, you know, a lot of obviously people that have had like cheated on each other come to her, you know. And she said, often the spouse that's been cheated on focuses on the person that the partner's cheated on with, right?
Yes.
And she said, but it's actually, if you think about it, it's actually more about the feeling that they got from that person. It's actually like irrelevant who that person is. They were looking for a version of themselves, right? That person gave them, that they
allowed them to be.
Yeah, they allowed them to be. So when you look at that, it like depersonalizes like the object of desire, and it's like, oh wait, what am I doing that's not allowing them
This person to do that thing that they
to
got with someone
feel
else.
that version of themselves?
Yeah.
Oh,
And then
brilliant.
it's really profound. So it's just like always, I think, reframing. And if you're allowing yourself to be curious, I think that is.
I think that's such a wonderful take home from this chat, Poh. Thank you so much. Is this idea of space and curiosity, which is obviously so pivotal to who you are now. And I love the fact that it's not there's no answer to this. There's no game over for you either. It's the kind of the enjoyment is in the curiosity, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Guys.
Thank you.
I think I love you guys. Honestly.
So nice to chat.
Yeah,
it's been really good.
No, it's so nice. Like I have to say, like doing this a fair bit, you're only as good as the questions you're being asked, and you guys are like a mirror. So thank you for just
Pleasure.
letting me play and talk and
Pleasure.
explore.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Poh.
Thank you.
Bye.